Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen here, leading the movement for movement. And yes, it is time again for another Tuesday training, unless you are not watching this on a Tuesday, which is fine. I don't know how your algorithm works. And that's it. Anyway, please, before we even start, like, subscribe, and every Tuesday, some other days also, you'll get another edition of Tuesday training straight fresh into your inbox or YouTube algorithm, however it works. Yes. Anyway, in this Tuesday training, we are going to be talking about how the environment influences our influences. We're going to be talking about how the environment influences our fitness and adapted PE programs, because environment is a really important component of the success of our fitness and adapted PE programs for the autism and neurodivergent population. So let's start out. Number one is how much control you have over your environment. So with Autism Fitness, we have certified pros who are working in schools, in gyms, in classrooms, in home situations, in clinics, outdoors, in recreational centers, in day hab facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So because you have such a large variation in environment, some things are controllable, some things are less controllable. So size of the space, the layout. So we're going to talk about some of the things that are major considerations, and some of these things you might have control over, some of these things you might not have control over, but we want to create an environment as best as we can that is conducive to the athlete being able to focus, to not getting distracted, certainly towards safety and having everything that we need in order to have a successful fitness session. Now, the cool thing, if we talk about equipment, and I'm going to cover that really quickly because that's a completely separate video, but if we want to talk about equipment, some of the most effective programming that we can do requires minimal equipment. If you've seen my videos before, we use medicine balls, resistance bands, sand bells, sandbags, boxes for squatting and push-up, not a large amount of equipment that we need in order to have a really effective program. So the ability to, or the need to have a huge space to house and utilize all of these different pieces of equipment is really I won't say a non-factor, but a small factor in all of this. So when we talk about space, oddly enough, and contrary to what many might think, actually the smaller space, or only as much space as we need, is usually best. I've had plenty of my autism fitness athletes who get overwhelmed if the space is too big because there's difficulty to focus and self-regulate. If there's a lot of space, and the more space, the more can be going on, or the more can be distracting. So really, working in smaller spaces, particularly when we are in one-to-one programming, is optimal. And when we have small groups, then, as much space as everybody needs in order to be able to do each exercise. If we're doing a circuit or to take a break, particularly with groups, we don't want too much space as well, because we don't want, if we have an athlete who may wander or may get dysregulated, we actually want to keep the space a little smaller and more controlled. So the smaller the space, actually, the better most of the time. The other thing, now we talk about lights, sound, all the other distracting factors. Light, sound, and stuff, really. So light, one of the best things to come out of the technological age, as far as just general kind of seemingly boring improvements, is LED lighting instead of fluorescent lighting. If you think back to your physical education experience, at least in my case, just a gigantic space, overhead lit, with terrible fluorescent lighting. I think that's conducive to nobody participating at their best, but certainly for our autism and neurodivergent population, this can be it can be overwhelming, it can be distracting. And so to have LED lights, or low lighting, not like we're training in the dark, but lower, softer lighting, is definitely a benefit. Windows, well, we can't always cover them. Sometimes what's going on outside might be distracting for an athlete as well. It's the same reason why I don't like mirrors. I do not like having mirrors in the environment, not just because it can be a distraction for the athlete, but following your own form in a mirror, some people can do it. I think most people have a lot of difficulty with it. Again, it can be a distraction. So I would opt for no mirrors in a situation. If the question is, should we add mirrors, should we not add mirrors, I would opt for no mirrors. So we have light, we have sound. We generally want to keep sound low. Some of our autism and neurodivergent athletes will enjoy music in the background, or for them it's reinforcing. It can be low. I just don't want to compete with music when I am coaching with an athlete. Most of the time, as long as it's not too loud, it's not going to be tremendously distracting. When it is, I find that it works more in the extreme ranges. Either an athlete absolutely loves having music when they are training, when we're running our fitness program, or it's going to be a major distraction. But usually the indicator is going to be the volume on that as well. Safety considerations now. Number one is safety and focus, but safety first. We want as clean and uncluttered a space as possible for the athlete to participate, and only have the equipment that we need to use at any given time in that space. We also want the equipment, well, not everything in one pile. We also want to be able to grab what we need at any given time. So for example, if we have an athlete who we quickly determine is not going to be ready, at least right now, for doing this overhead press with a pair of sandbells, we can grab a band and do a standing band pull down or some other variation. So I want that band or that other piece of equipment readily accessible to me. So if I need to make that switch, I can do it without having to walk all the way across the room. This seems like a small thing until you're running a session where all of a sudden you need a hurdle, or you need a sandbell, or you need a band, or you need a cone, and it's way across the room, but that athlete is a high support athlete, and they need to be, you need to be with them, and they need to be with you. And now the prospect of, okay, we have to walk across the room, this athlete is dysregulated right now. It creates a situation in which there are more variables and more challenges than we need, and then we're going back now and resetting that entire situation. So always best to have the equipment that you know you're going to need, or have an inclination that you're going to need, or is in your program that day, close by, so that you have access to it, right? So have your stuff nearby, but not in a pile. For some athletes, having extraneous equipment is going to be a distractor, so we may introduce one piece of equipment at a time and then maybe put it away. Sometimes we can involve the athlete in that as well. So the athlete may be responsible for putting away the sandbells or putting away the band after we are done with them. That's actually one way that we can utilize some perseverative behaviors or placing behaviors. If an athlete has a perseveration on putting objects away, especially when they're not being used or when they're done being used, all right, well, you're done with the medicine ball, you can put it away, and as long as that's safe and as long as that works into the time frame of our session, totally fine. So far, we want the environment conducive to fitness programming in the way of having low lighting, having a non-distracting space. Windows sometimes we can close off the windows. Sometimes we have blinds. Usually we don't. And looking also at the size of the space. The other thing about having a space that's too big is we can often we can section off some of the space as well. You can use cones, or you can use markers, space markers, not magic markers. Not a good idea to draw all over the place. and utilize those cones to set up the perimeter for that athlete also, which is a great visual and spatial barrier for them. This is where I need to be right now, so we can work on spatial awareness. Good idea. All right, so again, space is going to be dependent on what you have available, and then what you, the way in which you utilize that space, or cut the room in half, so the athlete is just working in one particular space. You want it clean, you want it uncluttered, and you also want it set up so that if you are using a visual schedule, or if there is a return point where we're always coming back to after a phase, so let's say after your athlete completes their warm-up phase, they come back and we check in and we go over what we're going to be doing next in our power phase. So finish up power phase with our medicine ball throws, with our sandbell slams, and then we come back to that checkpoint, and now we're putting together our strength phase, so the athlete can see what they're doing next. They can ask any questions, and so we have this nice rhythm going on, so we know what's going on in each place or at each point during the fitness session. Finally, when we're talking about small group or group fitness programs or adapted PE programs, the best way to do that, and we get into this in videos about programming variables for individuals versus programming variables for groups. A lot is the same, but some is different, and the things that are different are very important. If you're setting up circuit stations for a group program, then you need enough space that you have your push throw station and your sandbell slam station and your sandbag carry station. So all of these things are set up and you have enough space for them. And you may also want to consider having a break station as well. In autism fitness programming, when we're using the PAC profile, physical, adaptive, and cognitive, one of the things that's important in a group situation to realize immediately is you're never going to have the same levels of physical, adaptive, and cognitive skill. So one athlete might be motivated for the entire time. The other athlete might need a break every 5 or 6 minutes. And if so, where are they going to take their break as well? So having a designated break or self-regulation area is a really good idea with groups as well. So setting up those stations, what happens at each station? Do you need a visual for each station for each athlete, and setting it up beforehand so that we can get right to work or right to action. So the environment is, the uncontrollables are where the space is most of the time, the light that you have, the noise that you have. The noise we can usually do more about than the light, unless we're ready to change out all the lights into LEDs. Remembering that we can use spatial barriers. Cones work really well to section off an area for fitness if the space itself is too large. We don't want to do our fitness programs in a cavernous space. So sectioning those off, and then with a group, really being cognizant about delegating particular spaces to particular exercises to enable our athletes to stay on track. So those are some of the key points about setting up an environment that is conducive to fitness. The last thing I'll say, if you're running fitness programs in the home, have a designated fitness space. Keep it clean, free of clutter, because what will happen is that 4:30 p.m. will come around, 5:45, whenever your fitness time is, and then there's a pile of laundry or something else in the fitness space, and now, we have to put the laundry away first, and then we have to set up the room. Having that designated space, if possible, or at least keeping it clean and clutter-free enough, is going to enable you to say, it's 5:30, all right, let's get to our fitness, and all the equipment is already there. So rather than it being all over the house, having it confined to one space can really, really benefit the entire situation, from you being ready to get started and to initiate the fitness program, or your athlete at home getting ready to initiate the fitness program, without there being this extra, we have to put this away and put this here and put that there. So Small, seemingly small considerations, but highly important. Nonetheless, if in fact this has been helpful for you, please definitely subscribe to the Autism Fitness here on YouTube. And if you are ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, head on over to autismfitness.com. In 2024 and beyond, we have both virtual and in-person practicals so that you and your athletes get the hands-on, feet-on, brains-on training that you deserve. I am Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement. Thank you for watching.